birthday party, uh, so Dad will be preaching next Sunday, and so we will not have Sunday school. We'll probably have Sunday school for the kids. It'll just happen at the same time as church, and Dad will just preach to the adults that way. So, but anyway, so keep that in mind. Next Sunday there will not be any Sunday school. We've been talking about rightly dividing without losing your mind, and today we're going to look at dispensation number 5. Dispensation number 5, and this would be from Moses to Christ. So dispensation number 5. Let me get this thing opened up right. Come on. There it is. So dispensation number 5, from Moses to Christ. Last week we talked about the dispensation of promise, which would be from Abraham to Moses, right? When God makes a promise to Abraham to carry him through. And so God, basically what we see in that promise, or what we see in that dispensation, is that before God gives Israel the law, he gives a promise to Abraham. And so the foundation of God's dealings in that dispensation are not with human achievement, but it's just divine grace on God's part. It's very similar to our dispensation in a lot of ways, because Abraham steps out by faith. His faith is counted to him for righteousness, we're told in James. And so very similar to our dispensation, being the dispensation of grace. But the following dispensation would be from Moses to Christ. So this is a long dispensational period. The first ones seem to come real quick, even though we don't really know the timelines. Right? And so we don't know how long Adam was in the garden before he fell. We don't know some of those types of things. And so it's hard for us to set some hard timelines. And so, but from Moses to Christ, we're going to see some things here. And so you're going to see that this is where the law is going to come into play, right? This would be another way of terming this dispensation, would be the dispensation of law. Law is going to come into play. And you're going to see that man has a lot of misunderstandings about the law. Men have a tendency to think the law will fix their problems. Just abide by the law. But abiding by the law doesn't fix your problem. And so, in fact, all the law does, the law only exposes sin. It doesn't remove the sin. Right? So, if you're flying down the freeway, you're going 102 miles an hour, you get pulled over by the police. Right? The law doesn't fix it. The law just tells you you're guilty. Right? And so, God does not give the law. Here's what too many people, in fact, a lot of people in our present dispensation like to say, well, you should use the law when you're talking to people about Christ and that kind of stuff. And I don't necessarily have a problem with it as long as it's properly applied. But most of the time it's applied like this, that if you were righteous, right, you keep the law. But that's not accurate. The law didn't provide righteousness. Keeping the law didn't make you righteous. Right? In fact, all the law did was prove that you weren't righteous. It's really all it was there for. And so he gives the law to man to prove that man is unrighteous. He is proving a fact that is already in evidence, but this is further evidence of that fact that you're unrighteous. And keeping the law won't make you righteous, because keeping the law won't fix what's really wrong with you. Because what's really wrong with you is not your actions. Your actions are the outflow of your heart, right? Which Christ talks to us about in the New Testament. So, for over 400 years, Israel lives in Egypt during this dispensation, right? Or right before this dispensation, God delivers them by way of Moses. They come to Mount Sinai, and for the very first time, God gives a detailed covenant of commandments, ordinances, sacrifices, a bunch of and regulations to a nation. God hasn't done this up to this point yet. And so the question that we would ask in this dispensation, or the question of this dispensation would be, if God clearly defines his standards, is man capable of obeying those standards? And the answer that obviously is written all through your Old Testament is no. The law is perfect and man is a mess. We got problems, right? So where does God give the law? God gives the law in Exodus. In fact, take your Bible, go to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20. Here's where God gives the law. Really, 19 and 20 tied together is what's taking place on Mount Sinai. First thing I would say about the law is this: that the law reveals God's character to man. God has revealed himself to man already in the Old Testament. Before this, he's revealed himself to Abraham, revealed himself certainly to Adam, and even the garden. But now God is going to reveal his character to a nation. And he's going to reveal his character to a nation, and he's going to reveal his character through that nation to the rest of the world. And that's what the law is set up for, is in order to do that. So, I'm not going to read all of this, but I'm going to jump through these verses real quick just to give us a basic understanding here. So, God spake all these words. This is right. Moses says, "This is what God had to say. I'm the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. 400 years Egypt's been the boss, and God has brought him out now. So what's God telling him? Don't worship the idols. Don't worship the gods of the Egyptians." And so tells me you're not to have any other gods before me. Here's one of the places where I personally think that that the Orthodox and the Catholic have a problem. And I've heard their explanations for why it's not a problem. And what they say is we venerate them, we don't worship them, and that when they kiss the icons, right, they kiss the statues and they pray to the saints, right, and they try to pull a bunch of stuff, right? Nehemiah praying to the saints in the Old Testament, and saints being prayed to in Revelation. All of it is shaky ground at best, but this is where, right, even if you could say that maybe you could pray to the saints, even though I don't think you can. I think that Christ's completion on the cross gives us access through the veil to the throne of God. But even if you said all that, even if you tie it all off, right, the images are a problem. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Right? Now, here's the sleight of hand that the Roman Catholics and the Orthodox will do, is they'll say, see, and you've seen statues, right? Christians have made statues all through history. So what's the problem with us having some? The problem isn't the graven image. The problem is the next verse. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am jealous. He doesn't say the word. See that little word right there? Here, I'll use my little laser pointer for once, right? See that little word nor right there? That means that these two things are separate. Thou shalt not bow down thyself, nor serve them. Those are two separate things. So it's not one single thing. What the Catholics and the Orthodox will try to do is they'll try to make this one statement, that you're allowed to bow down to them, you just can't serve them. But that's not what that verse says. It says, don't bow down to them and don't serve them. So when you bow before the saint in the Catholic Church, what are you doing? Something God tells you not to do. And he's been telling them since Egypt not to do it. It's a problem, right? Doesn't mean that they're going to hell. Why? Because grace. Right? If their faith is in Jesus Christ, right? They may still be on their way to heaven, but that's an errant practice. Right? So he tells them, don't bow yourself to him. Why? Because I'm a jealous God. And I visit the iniquity of the fathers upon the children of the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. He says, don't mess around, right? They say, well, as long as your image isn't meant to be your God, it's fine. That is both the Catholics and the Orthodox will say. It's why they pray to Mary. Both of them pray to Mary. The Orthodox say the Catholics venerate her too much. They put her a little bit, she's 2 steps higher in the Roman Catholic Church than she is in the Orthodox Church, so therefore, right, we don't agree with them. But all of it to wrap up and say, they're both praying to and bowing to and serving gods that they shouldn't be serving. All right? And you can say, well, they're not our God, but if in practice if they serve the function of a god, what are they? Right? Looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, got webbed feet like a duck. Probably a duck, right? I mean, your only other option is a platypus, and I'm pretty sure it's not that, right? Platypus don't fly. Anyways, so going on, right? He says, don't bow to him. He says, but God says, I show mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments, right? So what he goes on to tell them, don't take the name of thy Lord in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guilty to take his name in vain. What does it mean to take the Lord's name in vain, right? This is not a study on the Ten Commandments. Maybe I'll do that another time. Here's what we've basically reduced it down to. We've basically reduced it down to this. Don't say Jesus Christ. Don't say, oh my God. That's what we say that it means. What it actually means is don't speak when the Lord hasn't spoken. Don't put God's name on something that he doesn't endorse. This is one of my problems with modern day prophecy. I have a word from the Lord. Do you? Because if it doesn't come true, did it come from the Lord? And if it doesn't come true and you stamped God's name on it, didn't you just take the Lord's name in vain? This is a problem. Right? Don't speak where the Lord hasn't spoken. It's also one of my problems with the Apocrypha. That's why the Apocrypha is not included in our Bible. You realize, you know what every book in your Bible says about itself? That the Lord spoke. Either to the individual or directly as far as the passage is concerned. Thus saith the Lord. You know what the Apocrypha doesn't say? These are the words of the Lord. They're great for historical context. And by the way, I think that we do a disservice by not reading them, right, and giving them their due, right, as far as just literature is concerned. But they don't, that's not the Lord speaking. Anyways, he says, I won't hold them guiltless. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Here's where you're sitting on a Seventh-day Adventist property. This is one of the ones that they hold as being true, right? And we would agree with them in the Old Testament. But when Christ comes in the New Testament, everything in the New Testament church seems to shift from Saturday to Sunday. They gathered on the first day of the week. They came together on the first day of the week. They brought the tithes and the offerings into the storehouse on the first day of the week, right? Everything seems to shift to that first day of the week, and the Sabbath seems to become something of the past. So the Sabbath was a day of rest. The first day of the week, right? God, when in Scripture, right? God rests on the sixth day or the seventh day, however you want to see that, right? The seventh day. Right, on the first day of the week, we celebrate the completion of all of that. Right, God's doing a new thing. And that's why we don't abide by the Sabbath. 6 days shalt thou labor, do all thy work. The seventh is the Sabbath of the Lord. In it thou shalt not do any work, nor thy sons, nor thy daughters, manservant, maidservant, right? Don't let anybody work in or around your house. Why we can't come on this property until after sundown on Saturday. If we wanted to come in here and clean up or whatever, right? So they still hold to that, and that's fine. Again, we don't think they're going to hell, right? That's not the point. The point is, right, God, the scriptural pattern in the New Testament shifts, changes, right? So anyways, let's see. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, right? The seventh day he rested. We still think that you ought to honor God one day a week. All right, we just think that day is Sunday now. And so then some of these are pretty easy to understand. Honor thy father and mother, that thy days may be long. We've taken this, in some ways, we've reduced this down to just obedience. Just obey your mom and dad. If you obey your mom and dad, everything's cool. That's not necessarily true. You're supposed to honor them, right? And there's a big difference between obedience and honor, right? One is to do what they say. One is to hold them in high respect. Right? Honor your parents with your life. Your parents gave you life, you ought to honor them with it. And obviously there are good parents and there are bad parents out there, and I get it, right? I've got foster kids. I understand all of that stuff. But right, if your parents are willing to do the work to try to honor God, you ought to honor your parents. right? So we shouldn't place them any higher than you would God, though, obviously. Thou shalt not kill. That seems like a pretty simple one, right? But there's a lot of nuance to it, right? But obviously, right? Killing for the sake of killing is out. And by the way, I think that includes all things, right? And so, but thou shalt not kill. We don't kill things, right, for no reason whatsoever. But you certainly should not. This is in reference to, right, killing your fellow man. That is what God is holding here, right? And basically what he's speaking about is murder. Even though I think in a perfect utopian, right, world, society, whatever, that would be true. There's no reason to kill anybody. If your ideas are so poor you can't discuss them and you have to resort to violence, you got a problem, right? But if you resort to violence against me because you suck at debate and argumentation, then I'm going to defend myself using whatever means necessary to do so. Right? Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's a fairly simple one too. Right? Listen, God has a purpose for the family. Everything in society has always broken down. You can look at the history of it. You can look through the psychology of it. Everything else, everything in history is always expected to be monogamous.